are you doing today?
I'm doing great, John. How are you?
I'm doing great. Thanks for asking. So, Jason, we're going to be talking about the film and VR experience of Eternal Springs. I remember that we chatted. I don't remember exactly if we chatted like around a year ago or a little bit longer, but we chatted when the Eternal Springs was going through festivals and some and theaters as well. So I wanted to ask you what inspired you this time to bring this experience of Eternal Springs to VR.
Yeah, thanks. Well, you know what? In our studio, we've got a small group, but we like to work across different mediums. And I think through that experience, I really feel like each medium has its own strengths and it sort of lends itself to different stories and experiences. And so we actually produced both of these productions at the same time. It was just spending time interviewing these people. I think the feature film format really lends itself to what we did with Eternal Spring, which was this larger story. It had this heist story of these underdogs who were being persecuted by the government, and they hatched this plan to climb the television poles and tap into the state-run television network to broadcast their own messages. That really lent itself to a complete feature film treatment. But there were also some really, really heart-wrenching personal stories that really connected with me. And I find that virtual reality really has this power to bring you closer to someone's lived experience, to really put, it's unmatched in terms of empathy and immersion, of putting you in someone else's shoes. And so this is where the idea came from, to situate yourself inside the experiences of one particular character or real life film subject, in fact, and to walk a mile in their shoes. So we go through a lot of things that we don't get to touch on in the film with respect to the one character, Mr. White. It's the alias he uses, Jin Shija. And this goes right from his first encounters with this spiritual practice, Falun Gong, that ends up being persecuted by the government, and how he enjoyed, the freedom to practice his beliefs, how things changed when all of a sudden the government said these people are bad and evil, and now everything is they're outlawed and we have to get rid of them, and how every channel you change on the television is broadcasting the same kind of message. You just feel the entire climate around you change, the people around you change. And then subsequent to that, their own efforts to get the message out. So we combined a couple of elements of sort of the samizdat sort of informational things that they would do, where they'd hand out leaflets and try and get their message out. This is what led eventually to the TV hijacking. They realized they couldn't compete with the overpowering voice that the government was putting out there, and what it's like being accosted on the street, being arrested, being interrogated then. And this is drawn from some of this gentleman, Gene Shedja's personal experience. So he was arrested on the street, had a bag put over his head. His wife was there across the street watching him at a distance, and she could say nothing. Um, and and then he was interrogated in this room where they would, cover the windows and just so they don't people outside can't hear you scream. And that's really horrifying, I think. And so VR gives you this opportunity to really feel that, to really feel what someone else has gone through. We don't get into a lot of gore and this kind of thing, but it's really about, man, sometimes we hear about these human rights stories, we hear about what people go through, but actually experience it in the first person for a moment, see what this was like for him. And then I think that builds greater empathy. So we went further with the immersion aspect of it, and that's why we use this new the Woozer vest. It actually taps into the sound design and it gives a haptic sensation as you're experiencing the VR experience. So this way you can literally feel the police as they arrest you on the street. You can feel your heart pounding in the interrogation, and then without giving too much away, as some of the elements of what's involved in that interrogation, there's a physical sensation there. Not pain, but definitely not for the light of heart either. It's really, I think, a visceral experience, but brings you closer to what these victims of human rights abuses have been facing in China.
I wanted to know because you did mention that you guys were doing both things at the same time. How difficult was it? Because when you see Eternal Springs is fully animated, great artwork, um, and then but going from animation to having models and having that experience, how challenging was it for you guys to be working at both things at the same time?
Yeah, I appreciate that. I think, it's interesting, like when you work in one medium, you sometimes gain ideas for another medium. Like I feel, we've had a few people watch the film who tell me, "Oh, I really like the video game aesthetic you used," and I had to scratch my head at first because I was like, I didn't consciously put a video game aesthetic in it. But then I recognized, we had all of these film subjects who were from China, and we felt that the Western audience would struggle to keep track of who was who and all of this. So we ended up using this kind of illustrated lower third, which was the concept drawings we had done for each of the characters in animation with their names. And we used that as they appeared even in live action, just to sort of connect the characters that you see in live action with the characters that you see in animation. And it was just a solution that we felt would address that issue. But in hindsight, it also does look a lot like you would see, in an RPG or some kind of visual novel where you've got the characters, sort of icon popping up with their text bubble. And so I think our experience in the gaming side of things brought some solutions and some ideas over to the film side. So I do think there's benefits to working across different mediums because each medium has its own challenges when you're trying to do something innovative or unique, and you can gain your experiences and solutions from different ways. So there's definitely some sort of challenges there, but there are also sort of discipline specific people. So like the coders and the developers that are working on our games and our interactive experiences, including Eternal Spring VR, they don't necessarily have a direct role in the film because the film is not interactive. So there's a sort of separate group of people who are working on some of those things. I do think that the interactive has another layer. I mean, the complexity of the story in interactive media is not the same, or especially in VR, because I don't think VR really lends itself to feature-length films. I mean, as a director, I don't control the shot anymore. So if I want to tell a story in feature film, I have all of these tools at my disposal. I can do a close-up shot if I want to communicate emotion. You do a close-up in VR, it's just someone standing very awkwardly right in your face. It doesn't work anymore. So those conventions disappear, and I don't think it really lends itself to, you don't have a third person subject that you're empathizing with. In VR, you are the character, you are experiencing it. So you lose what is useful for a sort of longer form story conventions in my mind, but you gain something else, which is empathy and this ability to put yourself in someone else's shoes. So the story becomes simpler, but and this is more contained. It's a 12 to 13-minute experience. But the challenge that does arise is that you can put your narrative in there. You don't know how that experience is until you build it. So there's that whole other side of like doing the game design and the game development and the coding and building it and saying, okay, how does this work? And every time you throw something else in, something can break. This is just the nature of interactive media. There's this iterative process to figuring things out. So definitely a layer of complexity, but I think it lends itself to different types of experiences as well. And I found doing both of them at the same time, they really feed off of each other. You get new ideas and new insights working across each medium.
It's really interesting the fact of working on both mediums and mentioning keeping that tone of video games. Have you ever thought, Jason, to bring Eternal Springs? You have it now as a full featured film. You have it in VR. Have you guys thought of touching bases on the video game aspect, like video games that were created by Telltale Games that
Mhm.
are depending on what you choose, it's what it happens. Making choices is what determines your fate in the game. Have you guys thought of touching that aspect as well with Eternal Springs, but bringing a full narrative with these other stories that I imagine that you would like to tell much more in detail?
Oh, it's a great question because you're actually talking to me at the Game Developers Conference just from my hotel room here in San Francisco. And so we've actually recently, we actually just put together some project financing for a new game that is not exactly in the world of Eternal Spring, but it combines these two elements that we've been working on previously with different projects, which is the narrative games. We do produce narrative games. Actually, we met Dashong, the protagonist of Eternal Spring, the lead artist of that film, by working together on a kung fu video game called Shuyan Saga a number of years ago. We knew him from his work as a comic book artist on Justice League of America and Star Wars comics, and we collaborated with him through Shuyan Saga, and that's where we learned his story of why he had to flee his home in China and what that had entailed, and that just led to this Eternal Spring, to the film. Now we're returning to like sort of our narrative storytelling, but we're combining with it real world documentary evidence. And so the fact that we produce documentaries, we also work in video games, we felt that a lot of our younger audience in the video game space are people who want to have social impact. They care about, doing good things in the world. And, there's not a lot of games that deal with real world things, but interactive media has a lot of potential in that space. And so we think we're in a unique position to combine those two things, to bring in the sort of, the interactive storytelling. It's a mystery. We're actually developing a game. It's called Hope in the City, and it's a mystery genre. And it does take place in a real world situation, fictitious characters, but actually the people that you run into are real life people and real life documentary evidence that's going to lead you into some elements of sort of the underbelly of what's happening in some situations and how people have suffered human rights abuses. And that's all taking place within, a very engaging mystery genre setting in the narrative game space. So we're actually producing something in that right now that does combine those two worlds. So I think you really hit on it. It's like there is a potential there to merge these worlds, to merge the kind of work that we've been doing, with our art and with the interactivity, as well as the documentary storytelling and the real world sort of human rights impact.
No, yeah. The reason why I bring the question up is because nowadays, well, not most of them, but most of the games right now are mostly based on microtransactions and loot boxes. But most of the other side of the video game world, that we're talking about stories, we're talking about characters, and that's why I wanted to ask if by touching Eternal Springs with VR, if there is a chance to bring it into a bigger, wider audience and seeing people at my age or younger
Mm-hmm.
probably streaming the game on Twitch or any other streaming platform just to tell a story, right? So that's why the question comes in. And what got you guys interested? Because that's something that as well keep myself thinking. What got you guys interested in using the the suit to bring the interactiveness from Eternal Springs VR to the to the user? What got you guys interested in that?
Yeah, I think it really, when you're making something, you zero in on like what is the core element of this experience, right? So for us, because we were working on the feature film and the VR, it was very clear the VR is about the personal experience. It's about putting you in his shoes, letting you experience that. So it's about immersion and it's about empathy. And how can we heighten that? Since that's the core element of that experience, how can we heighten that? Well, I mean, you're now immersed in the 360 experience. I mean, it's animated and brought to life, and we use Dash art. There is the, beginning and ending where you see Mr. White in live action. So you do connect with who this character is, but then you become him in this animated experience. So you have the visuals that surround you. We have the sound design. We have the voice acting of certain elements around you so that it feels immersive and you really feel like you're in that situation. But then there's that tactile element of it. And so when we saw that these tools were coming out, where now again, the experience works without it, but we worked with, our sound designer, Brett Killerin, he's great. Actually, he was just nominated last week for the Canadian Screen Award for his work on the feature film as well, for the sound work on Eternal Spring. He's very talented. And we said right from the outset, let's look at a custom sound design that taps into this vest. So for people who do have the vest, it's just going to heighten that experience. And we have a couple of them. So when we travel with this experience, we did this in the Yukon last year when we first presented the film at a festival, the VR film. We brought the vest and people could strap it on and they could feel the sensations as they were going. And the goal isn't to scare you, it's just to really heighten that immersion and that empathy, to make you feel even closer to what this person's experiences are. And we, of course, you know, we stop short of the real horrific things that he's gone through, but we let you, because the audience can use their imagination, but at least you walk through this and you feel like, okay, I know what this guy has gone through. So again, getting back to it, I think it's really about what is the core of the experience that you're trying to create, and then what tools are available to really heighten that so that you're strengthening the sort of heart of the experience.
Is there a chance that Eternal Springs, being the fact that you have collaborated with this comic book artist, Dang Sean, uh, is there a chance that we would see Eternal Springs like in a comic book or manga form? Like that people can the reason why I ask is because there's so many mediums that you can touch upon, and this story is such an amazing story. So is there any chance that we might see it like in a graphic novel or in a manga form, being the fact that you have collaborated with the artist?
Yeah, that's a great question. So actually, we took a lot of the art that we were making together with Dashong for the film, and we did actually produce it in another format, which is it's a digital graphic novel or digital comic book series, and it's in 4 episodes. We've just made that available this week or last week, I guess, throughout the world now. We had it sort of as a pilot in Canada at first, and now it's been made available worldwide. And this is 4 issues, and it's an interactive comic. So it features the artwork, but you can control a little bit how you go through the experience. You can experience it at your own pace. It has some original musical score in there as well, and other licensed music. It has its own oral experience as well. There is its narration and the story also. We had some great writers who worked with us on a number of our video games and other properties, and they take Dashong's story and sort of write a new look at it through his lens, through all of this stuff. And it's really a cool experience. It's a way to experience the art and the story from a different angle. And currently it's just available on iOS devices, but people can grab that in the iOS store worldwide as of last week. And I think it's a great accompaniment to the film. They can check out the whole experience from another perspective.
And Jason, this would be my final question for you today. What would be the future for Eternal Springs? Are we going to see more now that you have told us that you guys are in full feature film, VR, and in the graphic novel interactive space? Is there going to be an additional future for Eternal Springs in other mediums, or are you guys planning on doing something bigger to bring this story to fruition?
Yeah, so we're really appreciative of our broadcast partners that we've now secured in different markets to really get the film out there. So Vice is streaming the film right now. In the US, we will have other partners as well. In the US, in the UK, BBC Storyville will play the film sometime shortly. It's aired with CBC and it's still streaming with CBC Gem in Canada and Arte in France and Germany. These are among the sort of larger partners, and obviously, I'm a little partial to Canada because that's where I'm based, so I mentioned them as well. But we have, I think it was 20 or 21 sales across the world, so a lot of great broadcast partners in different markets. So if you can definitely look that up. You can go to eternalspringfilm.com to see where you can see the film. It is also available if you don't have it broadcasting in your territory. We have it as a transactional thing where people can just get a VOD from our website as well. So definitely we're in that phase now where we've gone through the festivals, we did the awards campaign. We were very appreciative and honored to be Canada's selection for the Oscars, where we were the first ever animated film, first documentary, and first Mandarin language film to ever be selected to be Canada's entry to the Oscars. That whole run was really magical and wonderful. And now we're in that phase where we're, making the film available more widely internationally, and at the same time putting out these other projects that sort of give those fans of the film a new way to experience some of the content, and also for people who haven't seen the film, a new way to be introduced to this story.
That's amazing, Jason. So, Jason, thank you very much for your time and giving us all the explanation on how the VR is used, that experience, and the other mediums that Eternal Springs is available. And I I really do hope that everybody has the same experience that I had when I watched the film for the first time. So, thank you very much for giving us the time.
Thanks so much, John. My pleasure.
Bye bye.